Shalom, family. This is Yuda. I am convinced that the New Testament is the crafty beast. I took my time and I took the scenic route. I wanted to see everything. I wanted to see it for what it really, truly is. And I've noticed all the traps. So today I am going to share the traps in all the New Testament verses. Well, let me take that back. If I recorded them all in this video, I probably wouldn't get to the end of it. So I brought enough. So I'm going to show you how the New Testament verses were deliberate traps. I'm going to show you how, and I'm going to show you why. So let's begin. Trap verses. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17. Excuse me for a minute, I just got a message. So, as I said, Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Now, in order for you guys to get the full impact on how they perform their tricks and how they set the traps, you are going to have to pay very close attention. Don't just skim over this. Listen closely. I put a lot of time and effort into this so that you can see with your own eyes. Now, I don't try to convince anybody. I don't debate. You either take it or you leave it. So here we go. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17. The fulfillment of the law. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Now, just reading on the surface of that, it sounds innocent. It sounds legit. And that's the problem. When you read, if this sounds good to you, or righteous to you, or feasible, then you missed something. And most of us did. So let me show you what you missed in Matthew 5 and 17. I originally listed a lot of New Testament verses, books, and authors, so to speak. But I determined that it's better if I show it to you this way. So Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17, and I'm going to read it again. 17, verse 17, the fulfillment of the law. Now listen carefully. I'm going to show you something. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law. In other words, I didn't come to destroy or take away the law. Neither did I come to destroy the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but check this out. This is the key part right here. But to fulfill them. Now let me show you how that's a trap. Reading Matthew chapter 5 and verse 18 through 19, for truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. First of all, if you understand what you read in the Torah, you should know that nobody is going to heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. That's the second lie, and I'm going to show you something else. Nobody is going to the kingdom of heaven. According to Torah, the new kingdom is going to be on earth. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be right here. So how does Matthew chapter 5, verse 18 to 19 trap you? The verse itself, for truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, here's the trap. False affirmation of Torah. Listen carefully. It sounds like Torah is being upheld. It did, right? Not one jot or tittle will pass. But this was the setup. The next chapters, especially Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 and chapter 48, reinterpret Torah commands through Greco-Roman moral filters, like lust equals adultery, anger equals murder, turning the other cheek replaces judicial justice, and this creates a new ethic that replaces tribal law with internalized morality, severing Torah from its communal and covenantal context. Trap number 2, redefining commandments. The phrase least of these commandments is not defined. Is it referring to Torah or to the new teaching that follows? This ambiguity allows Christian theologians to claim that Jesus' reinterpretations are the true commandments, thus replacing ancestral law with spiritualized versions. I hope y'all are getting it. Trap number 3, fulfillment as termination until all is accomplished is often interpreted to mean that Torah is fulfilled, and therefore it is what? Obsolete. Do you see that? This opens the door for doctrines that say Jesus fulfilled the law. So now what? We don't need it. We don't need it anymore. It's been fulfilled. Do you see the trap? We are now under grace. We don't have any laws. Y'all watch this now. This verse becomes a Trojan horse. It appears to defend Torah while preparing to remove it. Like I said, y'all ain't got to believe me, but I'm putting in my work. And I'm sharing it with you. You can take it or leave it. It's up to you. Trap number 4. individualized righteousness. Torah is communal, it's tribal, and it's generational. Matthew chapter 5 shifts the focus to individual behavior and internal purity, which undermines tribal boundaries, erases priestly distinctions, and it dismantles land-based inheritance laws. Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 to 40. And it reads, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments." It sounds good, right? So how does Matthew chapter 22, verses 36 and 40 trap you? This passage quotes Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5 and Levi chapter 19 and verse 18, but then reframes them as the entire essence of Torah, claiming that all the law and the prophets hang on these two. Here's how this subtly replaces tribal law. Reductionism. It collapses the 613 laws into a vague set of principles. Love God and love your neighbor, without even defining how love is expressed through tribal obedience. And universalization. It detaches the commands from Israel's covenant identity, making them seem applicable to anyone without tribal markers like circumcision, feast observance, or land-based statutes. This is serious, y'all. This is critical. But this is a brilliant move. Next, erasure of specifics. Torah love is not abstract. It's expressed through concrete actions. How many of y'all know that love ain't what you say? Love is what you do. It's expressed through concrete actions, honoring Sabbaths, observing clean foods, protecting inheritance boundaries, and maintaining priestly distinctions. Greco-Roman ethnicization. I have trouble pronouncing some of these words, y'all, so bear with me. The passage aligns with Stoic and Platonic ideals of universal love, which spiritualizes law and erases tribal boundaries. Love as obedience to specific commands. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5. Love Yah with all your being. But this is immediately followed by commands to teach Torah to children, bind it on hands and foreheads, and inscribe it on your doorpost. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18. Love your neighbor is embedded in chapter full of tribal laws. Gleaning for the poor, honest weights, no crossbreeding, no tattoos, no mixing garments. Deuteronomy chapter 10 verses 12 to 13. Love equals fear of Yah. walk in his ways, keep his commandments. So Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 to 40 is often quoted as a beautiful summary of Torah. But when we examine through proper lens, detailed attention, it functions as a strategic theological trap, especially for the scattered and enslaved descendants that seeking to reclaim their covenant identity. How? Here's how. It replaces tribal law with abstract ethics. These are Torah commands. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and 5, verse 5, Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 18. But in Matthew, they are reframed as the entire law, erasing the specific tribal statutes that define love in action. It traps us by detaching love from obedience, making it a feeling or principle rather than a covenant-bound lifestyle. It universalizes covenant commands by saying all the law and prophets hang on these two. It implies that anyone can fulfill Torah by simply loving. No need for circumcision. No need for feast observance. No need to obey the clean food laws. No need to obey land inheritance laws. No need to pay attention to priestly distinctions. And this erases tribal boundaries, and it invites Greco-Roman spiritualization, where Torah becomes a moral code instead of a national constitution. It also undermines ancestral restoration. Scattered descendants trying to rebuild ancestral obedience are told they are legalistic or missing the point of love. The trap is psychological. It shames covenant loyalty and replaces it with universal compassion, which sounds noble, but it dismantles tribal survival. It reverses the flow of authority, because in Torah, love flows from what? Obedience. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 12 to 13. In Matthew, obedience flows from love, complete opposite. But love is undefined, it's subjective, and it's easily manipulated. This reversal traps us in theological vagueness, making it hard to test the teachings by Torah. So how does John chapter 1 and verse 17 trap us? Let's take a look. John chapter 1 verse 17 is one of the most strategically engineered traps in the entire New Testament, and it reads, at first glance, it seems like a simple contrast, but for restorationists reclaiming ancestral covenant fidelity, this verse is a doctrinal trap with far-reaching consequences. Trap 1. False dichotomy between law and grace. This verse splits Torah and Messiah into opposing forces. For example, Moses equal law, but the Christian's New Testament described it as rigid and obsolete. Jesus, for example, equals grace and truth, liberating superior. That's the way they produce that image of Jesus. This creates a theological wedge, implying that Torah is harsh and outdated, while grace is the new path. But Torah itself is full of grace, jubilee cycles, land rest, protection for the poor, and forgiveness protocols. Trap 2. Replacing covenant with universalism, grace and truth came through Jesus, is used to universalize access to Yah, bypassing tribal identity, land inheritance, and priestly lineage. It erases the exclusivity of the covenant. No need for circumcision, no need to observe the feast or ancestral alignments. This opens the door for empire theology, where anyone can claim divine favor without covenant obedience. Trap number 3, reframing truth outside of Torah. Torah itself equals truth. Psalms 119, verse 142, your Torah is truth. But John chapter 1, verse 17, reassigns truth to Jesus, subtly removing Torah as the standard. This allows Christian doctrine to redefine truth through creeds, councils, and spiritual experiences. There is no longer a need for to be anchored in the tribal law because of this. Trap number 4, undermining Moses as covenant mediator by saying the law was given through Moses. It reduces Moses to a mere delivery system, while elevating Jesus as the embodiment of divine favor. This dismantles the prophetic authority of Moses and opens the way for reinterpretation of Torah through Greco-Roman lenses. So how does Romans chapter 10 and verse 4 trap us? Romans chapter 10 verse 4 says, Christ is the culmination of the law, so that there may be righteousness for everyone who believes. Romans chapter 10 verse 4 is one of the most doctrinally loaded trap verses in the New Testament. Here's the first trap. End of the law. Termination, not fulfillment. The Greek word telos, translated end, can mean goal, purpose, or completion. But Christian theology consistently interprets it as termination. This interpretation declares Torah obsolete, outdated, no longer needed, suggesting that belief in Jesus replaces the need for obedience to ancestral law. It traps us by serving or severing righteousness from covenant obedience, redefining it as mere belief. All you got to do is believe. You don't need none of those laws, none of those statutes, and none of those commandments. You just got to believe. Trap number 2, righteousness redefined outside of Torah. Torah defines righteousness as walking in Yah's commands, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 25, and Psalms chapter 119, verse 172. Romans 10 and 4 replaces this with faith-based righteousness, detaching it from feast cycles, land inheritance laws, priestly distinctions, tribal purity codes. This unhooks righteousness from tribal identity, making it a universal spiritual status. Trap number 3. It opens the door to replacement theology. By claiming Christ is the end of the law, this verse becomes a cornerstone for doctrines that replace Israel with the church. It erases Torah as the standard. It introduced grace as a substitute for obedience. You don't have to hear the law. You don't have to obey the law. You don't have to worry about what you eat. You can do whatever you want. It replaces and substitutes grace. It uses grace as a substitute for obedience. Christians are breaking every law in the book. It traps scattered descendants by offering spiritual inclusion while erasing ancestral restoration. Trap number 4, psychological disarmament. Restoration-minded believers are told, you are trying to earn righteousness. You've fallen from grace. Christ already fulfilled the law. This shames Torah loyalty, making covenant obedience seem like rebellion against grace. Y'all see what I see. What about Galatians chapter 3, verse 13? It reads, Christ redeemed us from the curse. In other words, the law was cursed. And Christ saved us from the law. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13 is a highly weaponized verse used to sever scattered descendants from their Torah fidelity. It's working too. So trap number 1, curse of the law equals Torah itself, according to them. The verse implies that Torah brings a curse. Y'all see, this is how they see the Torah. This is why they won't read it. But it's funny, they will go to the Torah when there's a verse in there they can use to justify this impostor. Up until that point, they don't need it. Ain't it funny how you don't need it, but you do, especially when it comes to finding something that you can twist to justify Jesus? Oh, but I'm not your fool. So trap number 1. This verse implies that Torah brings a curse rather than exposing disobedience. It reframes the law as inherently oppressive rather than protective and covenantal. This traps us by making obedience seem dangerous and Torah loyalty a spiritual liability. Trap number 2, substitution undermines accountability. Check this out. Christ became a curse for us. It introduces substitutionary atonement where someone else absorbs the penalty for our sins. This removes personal and tribal responsibility, disconnecting us from generational consequences, communal repentance, covenant restoration, And it traps us by outsourcing judgment rather than calling us to return to ancestral obedience. Trap number 3 replaces covenant justice with grace-based immunity. The verse is used to teach that we're no longer under judgment. Why? Because Christ took the curse. This erases the need for Torah alignment. It erases feast cycles and priestly distinctions. It traps us by offering spiritual immunity while leaving us vulnerable to real-world consequences of disobedience. Trap number 4 reinterprets Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verse 23. Paul quotes, "Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree." In Torah, this refers to someone executed for a capital offense, not a righteous substitute. The trap is in misusing Torah to validate a Greco-Roman crucifixion rather than upholding Torah justice. Torah says the curse comes from disobedience, not the law. Let me say that again. Torah says the curse comes from disobedience. It doesn't come from the law. Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse 26. Cursed is anyone who does not uphold the words of this law. Deuteronomy 30 verse 19. I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life. Torah is not the curse. Disobedience is. So, how does Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 13 trap us? By calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete. Let me put that another way. When they adopted or acquired their New Testament, the original was instantly obsolete. That's what they said. And they blamed it on the Creator. Now listen to it. By calling this covenant new, he, Christ, has made the first one obsolete. He did not have that authority, even if he was real. And what is obsolete and outdated will soon disappear. That's what they want. Get rid of the Torah so we can shine. Doesn't that sound like a hostile takeover? So Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 13 is one of the most strategic trap verses used to declare the Torah obsolete. So let's go through the traps. Traps number 1. Obsolete equals erase the covenant. The Greek term paleu, translated obsolete, implies something worn out or outdated. This verse declares that Mosaic covenant expired, not just fulfilled, but it vanished. Poof, out of here. It traps us by cutting off ancestral obligations, including feast cycles, land inheritance laws, priestly lineage, and tribal distinctions. Trap number 2, it replaces the covenant with a spiritualized, grace-based theology. The new covenant is framed as superior, internal, and grace-based. It replaces external obedience with internal belief shifting from communal law to personal conviction, tribal priesthood to universal access, Torah scrolls to heart inscriptions. This traps us by detaching covenant from identity, making it abstract and individualistic. Trap number 3, the misuses of Jeremiah 31. Hebrews 8 quotes Jeremiah 31, but it reinterprets it. Jeremiah's prophecy was about renewing the covenant with the house of Israel and Judah, not replacing it with something new like a New Testament. How can anybody, including Christians, read that and not see this? I tell you why, because they don't read the Torah. They only use it when there's something they can use to justify this impostor. So how did they misuse Jeremiah 31? Jeremiah's prophecy was about renewing the covenant, not making a brand new one, but renewing the one we broke with the house of Israel and Judah. It never said it would be replaced. That verse alone should, by its own merits, blow the New Testament out of sight and out of mind. Oh, but the Christians, they're too deeply indoctrinated. They are not coming out. They're going to hold on to this thing until they rot. So the trap is in claiming fulfillment while erasing the original audience, which is who? The scattered descendants, Israel. Us's. That's right, we'uns. Trap number 4, institutionalizes replacement theology. Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 13 becomes a doctrinal foundation for church supremacy over Israel, abolition of Torah-based righteousness, universal priesthood without lineage. It traps us by institutionalizing erasure, making restoration seem regressive. Oh, glory to the Creator. Torah covenant is eternal. It's not obsolete, and it will never be. Eternal has no end. So how can this impostor come along and claim that his new gift to you makes the original laws for you obsolete? It cannot be done. Torah covenant is eternal. It's not obsolete. Exodus 31 verses 16 and 17, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, a what? Perpetual covenant. Leviticus chapter 26 verse 44 to 45, now here's for all those people that always screaming at the top of their ignorant voices, telling me you can't keep the Sabbath in captivity. Leviticus chapter 26 verse 44 to 45 says even in exile. Even in exile, Yah remembers the covenant. Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 9, Yah keeps covenant to 1,000 generations. Torah never describes the covenant as obsolete. And if anybody was going to say it and do it, it would have been the one that created the book in the first place. And he never said it. The Torah never describes the covenant as obsolete. It describes renewal through return, not replacement. Christians, you've been lied to. So let's look at Colossians chapter 2, verse 14 to 17. And it reads, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, nailing it to his cross. Let no man therefore judge you in what you eat. Let no man judge you in meat, or in what you drink, or in respect of a holy day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come. But the body is of Christ. Did y'all understand what I just shared with you? Now listen, watch this. Colossians chapter 2, verse 14 to 17 is one of the most aggressive theological trap zones in the New Testament. This passage is often used to abolish Torah-based practices, but beneath the surface, it functions as a multi-layered trap. It dismantles ancestral covenant alignment. Here's the traps. Trap number 1, handwriting of ordinance, Torah erased. The phrase is interpreted to mean Torah commands, especially those tied to feast, Sabbath, and clean foods. By saying they were against us and nailed to the cross, it frames Torah as hostile, arrogant, belligerent, burdensome, and obsolete. This traps us by casting ancestral law as spiritual bondage rather than covenant protection. Trap number 2, feast and Sabbaths. They were called shadows. The verse claims these are a shadow of things to come, implying they're inferior, temporary, and have been fulfilled in Christ. This erases sacred timekeeping, your calendar, priestly cycles, and celestial markers that anchor tribal identity. It traps us by disconnecting us from prophetic timing, agricultural rhythms, and covenant memorials. Trap number 3, let no one judge you, equals license to abandon Torah. Y'all getting this? Let no one judge you gives you a license to sin. This phrase is weaponized to say, don't let anyone tell you to keep the Torah. It's used to shame obedience, especially among the scattered descendants trying to restore themselves. Feast observance and Sabbath alignment, dietary laws. The trap is psychological, and it makes Torah fidelity seem regressive while elevating spiritualized freedom. Trap number 4. It replaces communal law with individual spirituality. Torah is tribal, it's generational, and it's land-based. Colossians 2 reframes it as personal conviction, where Christ is the substance and Torah is just a shadow. This traps us by privatizing faith, erasing communal accountability and obedience, and ancestral structure. Feasts and Sabbaths are eternal signs. According to Leviticus chapter 23, feasts are appointed times forever. Exodus 31, verse 16 to 17, Sabbath is a perpetual, which is another word for forever, covenant sign. Numbers 10, verse 10, new moons mark sacred assemblies. They are not shadows. They are celestial anchors of covenant identity. So, what about Acts? How does Acts chapter 10, verse 15 trap us? Let's see. Acts chapter 10, verse 15, it reads, the voice spoke to him a second time, do not call anything impure that the Creator has made clean. That was a good one, y'all. That one got me when I was in that crowd. Acts chapter 10, verse 15 is one of the most misused verses to violate Torah-based dietary laws and ancestral purity. What Yah has cleansed, that call not thou common. This verse appears during Peter's rooftop vision, where he sees a sheet of animals, many of which are unclean according to Torah, and is told to kill and eat. But this vision is not about food. It's a coded message about Gentile inclusion, and when misread, it becomes a theological snare. So let's break that trap. Trap number one, misapplied to food instead of people. The visions is symbolic. Peter himself interprets it in verse 28. The trap is in literalizing the vision to abolish dietary laws. This leads to Torah erasure, especially among the scattered descendants that are trying to restore their ancestral eating codes. Trap number two, Yah has cleansed, equals all animals are now permitted to be eaten. This explains why the Christians eat their crab, shrimp, pork. The pork chop preacher tells them it's okay. He comes to their houses on Sunday for meals so he don't have to go and spend the money you gave him and prepare his own meal. All the animals that were once unclean, according to the New Testament, are now clean. This phrase is weaponized to say unclean animals are now clean. But Torah never records Yah cleansing pigs, shellfish, or carrion, or anything else he called unclean. The trap is theological. It redefines purity without Torah authority, replacing divine instruction with vision-based reinterpretation. Trap number three. This vision overrides Torah. The vision is used to supersede Leviticus chapter 11, which clearly defines clean and unclean animals. This is why you should be in the Torah, not the new fake testament, which clearly defines clean and unclean animals. You can only find that in Leviticus, which is in the Torah. This sets a precedent. Visions, Torah, which opens the door to endless Greco-Roman theological Christian overlays. It traps us by making subjective revelation superior to written covenant law. Trap number four, Gentile inclusion equals law abolition. The true message of Acts chapter 10 is that Gentiles can be grafted in. But here's the trap. The trap is in saying if Gentiles are accepted, Torah must be discarded. This erases the terms of covenant, replacing obedience, again, with universal grace. Clean versus unclean is eternal. Leviticus chapter 11, verses 44 and chapter 47, distinguishing clean from unclean is part of being set apart. That's part of being holy. Holy means set apart. Isaiah 66, verse 17, eating swine and abominable things is condemned, listen, all the way into the end times. Christians, you got no excuse for breaking these laws. And if you don't see now that you've been duped, bamboozled, there is no hope for you. Ezekiel chapter 44, verse 23, priests must teach the difference between clean and unclean. That brings us to Mark chapter 7, verse 17 to 19. How does Mark trap us? Verse 18 of Mark chapter 7. Are you so dull? He asked. Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. They poop it out. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. Mark chapter 7, verse 18 to 19 is one of the most strategically weaponized verses used to dismantle Torah-based dietary laws. Look how it got the Christians. They eat everything, man. And you know what? They believe that they can pray over dog poop and now it's suddenly clean. That's my own interpretation and my definition, because they think they can pray over anything. I told many Christians that come to my channel, the food that they're eating is fake, poison, and it's garbage. You know what they tell me? Well, I pray over all my food. How is praying over poison going to change poison? It's still poison. And if you know it's poison and you decide to drink it or eat it, you get what you deserve. You're supposed to die. Praying over your food is not about changing the chemical makeup of your food. Praying over your food is a way you give thanks only to the Creator for providing that food for you. It will not change what it is. You're just saying thank you. This is why y'all don't understand nothing. The Creator will not give wisdom to a fool. It won't happen. This passage is often cited as to abolish Leviticus chapter 11 and justify eating anything from pork to shellfish. But when we examine it through Torah, it reveals a multi-layered trap designed to sever ancestral purity and covenant obedience. Trap number 1, all foods are clean. That nullified the Torah, according to the Christians. The phrase, thus he declared all foods clean, is not in the original Greek text. It's an editorial insertion in many translations. Torah never calls unclean animals food. So this statement redefines abominations as edible, violating Leviticus chapter 11. The trap is linguistic. It uses translation bias to erase divine boundaries. Trap number 2. External versus internal defilement. The passage argues that defilement comes from the heart, not from what enters the body. This reframes purity as a moral issue, not a physical or ritual one. The trap is philosophical. It spiritualizes defilement, disconnecting it from bodily obedience and ancestral discipline. Trap number 3, ritual washing versus Torah law, confusion. The context is about Pharisaic hand-washing tradition, not Torah dietary commands, but the trap is in blurring the lines between man-made customs and divine law. It recreates a false equivalent. If hand-washing is tradition, maybe food laws are too. Trap number 4, heart-centered faith equals lawless freedom. That means Christians. The passage promotes a heart-based spirituality that rejects external regulations. This traps us by privatizing holiness, making Torah obedience optional or obsolete. It undermines communal covenant markers like clean eating, ritual separation, and priestly discernment. Take a look at Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 17. Those who consecrate and purify themselves to go into the gardens, following one who is among those who eat the flesh of pigs, rats, and other unclean things, they will meet their end together with the one they follow, declares Yah. Christians, do you still believe you can eat anything, that you can just pray over it and it's okay? This shows you're following the wrong guide, the wrong book. There is no New Testament. So, how about Romans chapter 6 and verse 14? For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not, listen, under the law, but you are under grace. See how Jesus took away the law and replaced it with grace so that you don't have to worry about the laws no more. You're under grace. Romans chapter 6 verse 14 is a subtle but foundational trap verse used to sever Torah obedience from the path of righteousness. This verse is often quoted to justify abandoning Torah, especially among the scattered descendants like us seeking to restore ancestry covenant fidelity. That's why it's so hard for us to get our people that's trapped in that New Testament lie to come back home. That's why. Trap number 1, not under law equals law abolished. The phrase not under the law is interpreted to mean Torah no longer applies. This reframes obedience as bondage and grace as freedom from the ancestral responsibilities. It traps us by declaring the covenant is obsolete, especially when it comes to the feast cycles, clean food, Sabbath, and tribal distinctions. Trap number 2. Grace versus law is false dichotomy. Torah is full of grace. Jubilee, forgiveness, land rest, protection for the poor. Romans chapter 6 verse 14 pits grace against the law as if they're opposites. This traps us by redefining grace as lawlessness rather than covenant mercy. Trap number 3, sins, dominions, misframed. Torah defines sin. John chapter 1 or 1 John chapter 3 verse 4, sin is transgression of the law. By saying sin shall not have dominion and then removing Torah, the first destroys the definition of sin. It traps us in moral relativism. I don't know what's going on with me in pronouncing these words. Where sin is whatever feels wrong, not what Torah defines as wrong. See the switch? It's just a bait and switch. Trap number 4, psychological disarmament. Restoration-minded believers are told, you are under grace now. Stop being legalistic. The law was a burden, according to the New Testament Christians. Christ set you free. This shames Torah loyalty, making ancestral obedience seem rebellious and outdated. Grace is within the law, says the Christians. Well, Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 to 7, Yah is gracious and forgiving. This is within covenant terms. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11 to 14, Torah is near. It's doable, and it's life-giving. Psalms chapter 103, verse 17 to 18, grace is for those who keep his covenant and remember his commands. That leads us to Galatians. How does Galatians trap us? Galatians chapter 5, verse 4, it reads, you who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ. Believe it or not, that's a good thing. You have fallen away from grace, but this is the Christian threat to anybody who comes to realize, whoops, I'm following the wrong book, and decide I better go back to the Torah. Well, they made sure that they would scare you right back into that lying book by telling you, you who are trying to leave the New Testament and to go back to your Torah, you are alienated from Christ. Listen, they say you have fallen away from grace. So Galatians chapter 5 verse 4 is one of the most weaponized verses used to cut off Torah obedience and trap scattered descendants into spiritual amnesia. Trap number 1, justified by law. That means rejection of Torah. The phrase is twisted to mean anyone who keeps Torah is rejecting the Messiah. It traps us by framing Torah obedience as rebellion rather than covenant loyalty. Restoration-minded believers are told, if you return to the law, you will fall from grace. Well, I fell from grace a long time ago, and I'm happy for it. It traps us by framing Torah obedience as rebellion rather than covenant loyalty. So restoration-minded people like me and you are told, if you return to the law, you will fall from grace. Trap number 2, false definition of grace. Grace is redefined as freedom from Torah. That's what it means, y'all. Not mercy within covenant. This traps us in a Greco-Roman mindset where law is equal bondage and grace equals license. But Torah grace includes Jubilee release, forgiveness cycles, mercy for the poor and the enslaved. Trap number 3, severed from Messiah equals severed from identity. The verse says Torah keepers are estranged or severed from Messiah. This trap This traps us by disconnecting Messiah from ancestral covenant as if he came to replace it. It erases tribal lineage, feast cycles, prophetic timekeeping. Trap number 4, psychological warfare. Restoration teachers are accused of falling from grace. This creates fear, shame, and confusion, especially among those reclaiming their ancestral paths. It traps us into spiritual dependency upon Greco-Roman theology, not Torah discernment, but Greco-Roman theology. But the Torah anchors are that breaks the trap, or Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 25, it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments. Psalms 119, verse 142, your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your law is truth. Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20, to the law and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Christians do not speak according to Torah. Simply put, there is no light in them. You cannot see. You cannot hear. So here's John chapter 14 and verse 6. How does it trap us? It reads, Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth. We just heard the truth, y'all. And the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So John 14 and 6 is one of the most quoted verses used to centralize salvation through a Greco-Roman overlay, often severing ancestral covenant paths. This verse becomes a trap when interpreted through colonial theology, not Torah context. Trap number 1, exclusive gateway theology. The phrase, no one comes to the Father except through me, is weaponized to erase all ancestral paths that leads to Yah. It traps us by declaring Torah obedience is insufficient, nullifying prophetic lineage and priestly roles, replacing covenant with creed. Trap number 2, Messiah as replacement, not fulfillment. Instead of seeing Messiah as the embodiment of Torah, this verse is used to replace the Torah entirely. It traps us by severing the connection between the Messiah and Moses, ignoring that the way was already defined in Torah in Psalms 119 and verse 1 and Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 33, making Messiah a new deity rather than the Torah walking servant of Yah. Trap number 3, Messiah as a replacement, not a fulfillment. The verse is used to replace Torah with personified creed. The way becomes church membership. The truth becomes doctrinal allegiance. The life becomes afterlife promises. This traps us by serving Messiah from Moses, by severing Messiah from Moses, as if he came to start a new religion. Trap number 4, redefining truth outside of Torah. Psalms chapter 119, verse 142 says, your law is truth. But John 14 and 6 is used to redefine truth as a belief in a person, not obedience to Torah. This traps us in emotionalism over discernment, creed over covenant, church dogma over ancestral ethics. So how about 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20 to 21? Where's the trap here? Let's read chapter 1, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20 to 21. It is a chameleon verse, one that appears flexible and empathetic, but when interpreted through Greco-Roman overlays, it becomes a trap that dismantles Torah consistency and tribal integrity. So the first trap, Torah as optional costume. Paul claims to become as one under the law when he is among the Jews, and as one outside of the law when he comes around the Gentiles. This reduces Torah to a flexible identity, not a binding covenant. It traps us by making Torah situational, treating ancestral law as a tool for persuasion, undermining the idea of one eternal standard for all generations. Trap number 2, double standard theology. Paul's shifting posture creates 2 sets of rules. One for the Jews, which is Torah-based, one for the Gentiles, which is grace-based, or the law of Christ. This traps us by erasing the Torah's call for one law for native and stranger alike. Numbers chapter 15, verse 15 to 16. Justifying selective obedience. Promoting spiritual assimilation over tribal restoration. Trap number 3. Law of Christ as a replacement system. The phrase under the law of Christ is undefined and used to override the Torah. It traps us by introducing a new moral code disconnected from ancestral statutes. Replacing priestly and land-based and time-based laws with abstract ethics. Severing scattered descendants, us, from their covenant obligations. I think mosquitoes is getting me here. Trap number 4. Identity fluidity versus covenant fidelity. Paul's claims to become all things to all people in his verse 22 promotes adoptive identity, not rooted obedience. This traps us by encouraging compromise for the outreach purpose, undermining the cost of covenant loyalty, making Torah seem like a barrier to unity rather than the foundation of it. And Ephesians. How does Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15 trap us? Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15 reads, by setting aside in his flesh the law, which its commands and regulations, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 15 is one of the most strategically weaponized verses used to sever scattered descendants from Torah fidelity and ancestral covenant. Trap 1, abolishing the law as a divine act. So getting rid of the Torah was a divine act. The verse claims that Messiah abolished the law of commandments contained in ordinances. This is interpreted to mean Torah is obsolete. It's replaced by a new spiritual system. It traps us by framing Torah as hostile or diversive enmity, justifying lawlessness under the guise of peace, severing covenant identity from obedience. Trap number 2, replacing covenant with one new man. The goal of abolishing the law is said to be the creation of one new man. This phrase is used to ease or erase tribal distinctions and replace ancestral identity with church identity. It traps us by promoting spiritual assimilation, undermining the tribal structure of Israel, and replacing covenant with abstract units. Trap number 3, ordinances and barriers. The commandments contained in ordinances are portrayed as barriers to peace. This traps us by painting Torah as a source of division, ignoring that Torah was given to bless all nations through Israel. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3. Replacing divine instruction with human interpretation. Trap number 4, peace without justice. The verse claims peace is achieved by removing Torah-based distinctions, but peace without Torah is false reconciliation. It traps us by offering unity without repentance, promoting inclusion without restoration, ignoring the prophetic call to warn to return to covenant, Jeremiah 31 verse 33, Ezekiel 36 verse 27. Justice before peace, Isaiah chapter 9 verse 7, Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 20. There is no New Testament. And the more I research and study, the more I realize how deeply ignorant and stupid I was. Now that I'm on the other side of that fence, I'm looking back and I'm seeing my brothers and sisters who call themselves Christians and still don't see. So my best way to explain that is simply because the Creator said 2/3 of Israel will be destroyed. They cannot see and they cannot hear. So if they can't see and they can't hear, we cannot teach them. There is a remnant among these Christians who are looking for a way out because they have seen things that have deeply disturbed them, confused them, and started them to wonder. Those are the ones that I'm looking for. So until then, I will continue my journey and my search, and I do appreciate each and every one of you. Shalom.